What's up, guys? Welcome to the Cloud Gaming Unfiltered podcast. I'm Sunny, and today we have quite a few things to cover. I'm very excited. We're going to talk about a lot of things here. First, we'll start talking about your questions and everything related to cloud gaming. And this was a question that I put out to the community. So everything that I talk about in today's podcast are questions coming from you guys. So we'll talk about if I see cloud gaming being saturated down the line, the direction of GeForce Now, and if I were to make a cloud gaming game, what would I make? And I have to say, my inspiration for today's podcast is from Bandrew. He's a guy who does YouTube and he does audio. He covers like microphones and he has his own podcast, but I was watching what he does and I loved his style of podcasting. Essentially, he just takes questions from his community. He answers them. Sometimes he talks about something he wants to just mention in the audio world, and he's pretty much my inspiration because it works. I do these Let's Chat, Let's Talk streams every Sunday. And one thing that I feel like I've always been decent at is answering your questions when you guys present them to me, and then just let it rip, let it talk, and about anything and everything related to that. So I figured, why not take something that I've been doing for a long time and a strength and turn it into a format in podcasting that I'm going to enjoy. At the same time, hopefully you'll get some enjoyment and maybe some information out of it. When it comes to cloud gaming, I feel like I do have mostly my finger on the pulse. I mean, I'm not perfect, but it's something that I've been covering for many years. And I really start to see a lot of different ways that this is going to go and a lot of different things. And I see it from different formats, from your comments, my own thoughts, what industry leaders are saying. So this is something that I feel is something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and I think we finally nailed a format that I'm comfortable, that I'm happy with, and that doesn't have me maybe stressing out and worrying about what to talk about or what to say, because everything comes from you guys. So make sure, if you're watching this, if you're watching it from YouTube or some sort of podcast place, if you can find a way to ask a question through my Twitter or in the YouTube comments, wherever, and I will answer them in a future podcast and I will highlight them. You guys will see the format here today. This will go out first to Patreon members first, so thank you to them, and they'll get about a day early access before the YouTube members, and then from there on out, we'll release it to all of YouTube. So again, thank you for all your support, and I'm very excited to do it. So let's just start getting into this now, as I've rambled off enough. So here's the first question. Is from Rusty. He says, Sonny, first off, keep up the good work. Cloud gaming gaining traction, do you think that the gaming industry will become oversaturated with gaming streaming services and apps, much like the TV and movie industry? Do you instead have a few great services they will be much like today, where you have something like Hulu, Disney, Netflix, Paramount, etc., just to get movies and TV shows you want? And then he goes on to say, I personally think Stadia's model is great with the ability to own your games, but I wonder what's going to look like in 5 years with all the major players wanting their piece of the pie. And I think this is a great question from Rusty to start this podcast off. This is something that I have given my thoughts on quite a bit on those live streams, and the truth is that 1000% this is exactly where cloud gaming is headed, and you can already see it right now. We have Amazon Luna, who has dedicated channels, and Amazon actually, they like to mimic what they do with Amazon Prime and the way they handle movies and TV shows. They have their own HBO, they have their own like Cinemax channel, and so Amazon Luna is already almost doing the same thing within their own service. Then you mix in GeForce Now, who has games that others don't and that people want to play. There's things like, if you look at just this year alone, there's Dying Light 2. If you were somebody that really wanted to play Dying Light 2 in the cloud, well, your only option was GeForce Now. Then you look at Stadia and the games they had last year. They had Resident Evil. Well, no one else had Resident Evil. And as this continues to expand further, I think you'll see PlayStation get into the game a lot more than they are now. Essentially, Xbox will be doing the same thing, and 1000% yes, this is going to go in that direction. And I don't think people realize that it's going to expand even further. Right now, it is beyond ridiculously saturated. I think I saw a meme the other day that showed how it's all come full circle from the cable companies to where it was like 20 years ago to where it is now, where it was a really funny meme, and there's no way I'm going to be able to find it because I just saw it in a random place. But today you have to subscribe to if you have to subscribe to Disney Plus to get the Marvel stuff. You have to subscribe to Netflix to get certain shows that are only on Netflix. You have to subscribe to HBO Max to get certain things. And 1000% that's going to happen to the gaming industry. And what people don't realize is that a lot of these publishers and developers are actually working on their own cloud versions. And those might be used. They might be using streaming tech from Stadia and Google. They might be using Azure from Microsoft, or they might be using the stuff from Amazon. And you're going to end up seeing a lot of these publishers and developers actually just put out their own cloud service, and they won't actually put it out on a GeForce Now, a Stadia, or a Luna. They'll have their own. And so what's going to end up happening 1000%, unfortunately, you'll have to subscribe to certain things to play certain games. And that's literally the way it's going to be. I guarantee it. It's what you see right now with movies and TVs is going to reflect what happens in gaming. The real question at this point is, when is that going to happen? When are we going to see that? Is it going to be 2-3 years down the line, or is it going to be 5 to 10 years down the line? And I think we're still some ways away, because right now, cloud gaming, you're going to probably hear this on this podcast from here on out, as long as I do this podcast. Cloud gaming is still very far away from really being adopted by mainstream users. So you're definitely going to see this gradual increase of more services opening up within, like, maybe the own publishers and developers. Maybe you'll see new contenders. I don't know. You'll see all sorts of different things, and it's unfortunate it's going to go in that route, but I guarantee it will. So if you're somebody who's really hoping to, like, let's say, be on Stadia and hope that every single game and everything is going to come to one service, or if you're on Xbox, it's not going to happen. But you'll have a better chance with some of these mainstream services. I think Xbox will end up getting as much as they can. PlayStation will, and hopefully Stadia is in that same regard. And yeah, that's definitely the future. And like I said, it's a little unfortunate we're going to see it like that, but I would literally bet everything I own that's exactly the future it's going to be. Like I said, though, I think it's going to be quite a few years away. Next question comes from Mark Young, who says, why do you love cloud gaming? I love cloud gaming because I've always wanted to be mobile. I've always wanted to be not tethered to my desk, like right here. I've always wanted to be able to be on the go and play wherever I want. I think ironically, the biggest attraction for me has always just been to sit on and lay on my bed and just play, because I'm on my bed a lot. I'm not a guy who, like, sits on his couch and relaxes. I've never been a couch guy. Never been a guy who sits at his TV with his couch playing a video game. Maybe when I was younger, because I was forced. But as an older guy who can make my own decisions now, right? I've always just, like, I like to relax in bed and chill. So for me, one of the biggest reasons I've loved cloud gaming is just the portability, the fact that you can just do whatever you can bring it and do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about pretty much anything. The ease of access. I could just play a game. I don't have to worry about downloads. So there's a lot of benefits, the normal benefits most people have with cloud gaming. And one thing that I love is, and I've always loved, is the possibilities of cloud gaming and what it can really bring in the future. And I think we'll see more of that here in pretty much the coming years. Our next question comes from Patrick. He says, I'm curious where the direction of GFN will lead. I remember the talk of Stadia being dead on arrival because the decision to build on a Linux platform, and now GFN is also getting indie and potato games. Can this licensing problem be overcome? What's your opinion of the inequality between physical and digital game store and cloud stores? For digital and physical games, the publishers are paying the stores to offer the games. For cloud gaming, the store should pay the publisher to offer their games. That's dumb, he says. Instead of being happy not having to care for hardware settings anymore, many customers would have cloud gaming. Sorry, I rumbled through there. Let me hit on, I guess, like, the general premise of your question. Can the licensing problem be overcome? And what's your opinion of the inequality between physical and digital game store and cloud stores? I think this is a question that, and I'm just to fully try to understand what you're saying, I think this is a broad general question of maybe where cloud gaming is as a whole, which, again, like I mentioned earlier, cloud gaming will be, or this subject that I'm about to mention is going to be probably repeated almost a million times, like I do on my live streams. You know, cloud gaming is still just in the beginning of its infancy and it taking off and people really accepting it as a medium of and ways to game. And as far as the direction of GFN, I think GFN will always be in a very niche category And it won't be like something where people think of GFN as this standalone platform. Like they won't think of GFN like you do an Xbox or a PlayStation, or even if we compare it to other services, they won't think of it as Amazon Luna being its own thing and Stadia. I think GFN will always be in that place where you use it to connect to your games through whatever platform or whatever platform you have. So if you have your games on Steam, it'll always be that middleman. And I think that's where GFN is, for me, always been put in a different place versus the other services in regards to that. I don't think of GFN as its own platform. GFN doesn't have a friends list where you can hook up with other GFN players. GFN doesn't have its own hardware of any kind that you sell to people to where you feel branded to GFN. So I think GFN is always going to be in a pretty decent space because there'll always be gamers who can't keep up with the hardware, and they need to, especially with the way the GPU prices, even though they're starting to come down now, and I mean the graphics cards, even though the prices are starting to come down now, who knows what'll happen next generation, which is about to hit. GFN, I think, is always going to have a place, and I think GFN will continue to expand, continue to get more games down the line. The licensing problem, like you mentioned, I think that's just going to get worse and worse as time goes on, and more cloud services, kind of going back to the first question we answered on this podcast. So I don't know if that answers a lot of what Patrick, you were saying. By the way, shout out to Patrick. He has been a Patreon member and a YouTube member for a long time. So shout out to him. And thank you for all your support, my man. I'm sorry if I didn't get that question 100% correctly. All right, let's jump to Crywolf here. He says, many people I know ask about the CO2 footprint of cloud gaming because of the huge data centers used for cloud gaming. I think it's a very interesting question because many gamers don't realize what more resources are needed for traditional gaming, such as hardware, consoles, PCs, DVDs, transportation. Keep on gaming. And it's funny because Crywolf, okay, right there at the very end, you actually mentioned something. I actually had to go back to a video that I made back in 2020 to answer this question. Before I knew I was going to take on your question, and I needed to do research to remember some information, and I wrote something down here. I think it's a good question for those really wondering about what footprint it's going to do on the environment. And if they're thinking that it's going to do worse, I would argue it doesn't. I think there needs to be some more studies, and I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm going by my information from 2 years ago. I don't know if there's been new information since, but I did do a whole video and quite a bit of research. There's one thing that I want to mention here. It says, according to the console carbon footprint research, if all the FIFA 19 players threw away their disc when purchasing FIFA 20, they would generate over 283,000 pounds of landfill waste. Not only that, but delivering... Oh, sorry, this is something that I wrote down. Okay, so I just wanted to focus on that real quick. So again, I made the video 2 years ago, so that little sentence there was updated from like 2 years ago, so it was mentioning FIFA 19. But that gives you guys a picture, right? It gives you a clear picture. 283,000 pounds of landfill waste. We're in 2022 now. I bet some of those discs got thrown away now. So the better question, I think, would be is... what's the difference and is cloud gaming improving upon it? And when I had done my research, it was like a big improvement. Yeah, there is some stuff that you want to worry about with these big data centers, but I know, and this is going off the top of my head. So again, I probably have to do my research a little further and trying to remember, but I remember that these big companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google, at least some of them, one of them, I think Google for sure, they have to do some stuff to counter their footprint, what these data centers doing, so they go green. So I think overall, cloud gaming is 1,000% cleaner. One of the things that people don't realize too is that when you're out there and you're delivering these physical consoles, or you're going out there and driving to a GameStop, or your CDs are being mailed to you from Amazon, all that creates more pollution to the environment because, gas is being wasted to deliver these things, and then we're not even talking about all the plastics and everything from the consoles, the Xbox Series X, and all these, like the old PlayStation 5. This is all physical stuff that more than likely will mostly end up in some landfill, maybe in like 15, 20 years in some way, especially as these things start to break down. So that's all stuff to think about. So overall, from the research I did some time ago, it wasn't that long ago, but some time ago, definitely the footprint from the cloud gaming aspect of it is much less. Is it like 100% perfect and better? No. And that's something that I think will get better over time, and we'll see how it continues to evolve, but these things will become more and more efficient. And if I were to say what's the better outlook in the future for a footprint, the footprint of it, it's definitely cloud gaming, because it's just going to get more and more, what's the word? It'll get, I'm sure, maybe more efficient, essentially, is the word that I'm looking for. So that's a great question. Not a lot of people, that one kind of threw me off a little bit. I had to go back. I will have a video link to that video that I did. This is a video on my channel. It's called The 3 Hidden Benefits to Cloud Gaming and Stadia That You Never Knew About. And I think that the headline there, and maybe what I'll do is I'll break that video down and relaunch it, because I think it's a really important piece of information that people don't know. All right, our next question is from Rock Mirth. He says, if they made a game designed specifically for the cloud, what game would you like it to be? I think this is a great question. I've answered this question many times in the past when Stadia was making their own games, and I don't answer the question now because, technically speaking, the only person or the only company that we know is actually working on cloud gaming, their own cloud gaming specific game, is actually Xbox now, which we heard about, I think, recently, with the last couple months. So it's a great question to revisit now, because I think there was a portion in time where we didn't have anyone really making a cloud game that we knew of. And it's a great question, because what people don't really understand is the way that cloud gaming is going to really take off. The number one way it's going to take off, like if it's ever going to be the most dominant way to game, like people just give up their consoles or physical stuff, will be with cloud-only enabled games. Otherwise, I think you'll always see the physical hardware and the cloud gaming stuff always competing as the years goes on. But one way you will convert many people is with a cloud-only game. And one thing that people might not realize about cloud gaming and making a cloud-only specific game is that there's possibilities that have never, ever been done within gaming that could happen with the advancement of cloud gaming itself and making a cloud-only game. When you make a video game for a specific piece of hardware, or you're making a game that you have to account for all the people who have PCs out there, and then you have to account for the lowest specs of those PCs, and you have to make a game built around all that stuff, you really have to limit your imagination of what the game that you're making is capable of. One thing that cloud gaming does is completely eliminate that. You eliminate that because everybody will be on the same cloud gaming service. Therefore, they'll be using what's being streamed from a data center to their screen. All they need is the screen. So then what you're doing is you're enabling the limitation now to just be in these massive supercomputers that are streaming your game. So when you do that, and then nobody else that's actually playing the game is no longer limited by their hardware, they're only limited by maybe their internet connection or something, then you really start to think of the massive things you can do. So one of the best ways I feel like you would introduce people to cloud gaming, if I were to make a game specifically right away, I think I would make two types of games. But the first game I think I would make is something that a lot of people are familiar with. I don't know if this is going to continue, because I've always talked about this in the past. It's been years now, and I still think it would make a mark today. I know that battle royales are really starting to, I don't know if they're starting to go downward. They're not, but I don't know if they're like, I feel like they're at their peak, and I don't know if they're gaining any more popular. I could be completely wrong and maybe out of touch with that subject specifically, but I think I would make a cloud-only battle royale that has hundreds of players at once duking it out to be that top person at the end. And the reason I say that is because I think it would be the fastest cloud-only game you could make that would make the biggest impact right away. And for me, that's very important, because if you were to make a game like this that's never been done before, people are always playing these battle royales and they're limited to just 100, maybe a little bit more than 100. But if you were to make a game where all of a sudden now you have 300 to 400 people competing, or even just 200, which would be more than anything we have right now, and we're talking about in more of a AAA quality, that would be something that I think would blow away people, and they would flock to it, and they would try cloud gaming. Therefore, they would adopt cloud gaming even easier overall. I feel like a game like that could make such an impact almost right away, and it wouldn't be as hard to make. You would make the map bigger than any map we've ever seen in a battle royale setting. You would then make more players than we've ever seen. And imagine the competitions and things that would go with that. Another game that I would make, so I'm giving you a bonus here, is I would definitely make an MMORPG. So that's like the World of Warcrafts, that's the EverQuest. What other games out there that I can think of at the top of my head? There's a lot more, but the ones that have thousands of players that are working together or even battling it out, maybe in a fantasy setting. And I think something like that might be being worked on by Jade Raymond. I think that's something that she's always wanted to do. She could be working on something like that over at PlayStation right now. I know she's always wanted like a world where people are interacting with each other, like a virtual world. And a lot of that would tie into like maybe an MMORPG, but I think that's one way to do it. But that's more of a long-term, many years. And if you were to bring something, like a World of Warcraft, and you have hundreds of players working together battling this massive dragon, because that's what it would take, right? You think about it, when you're playing a game like a World of Warcraft and you have 25 players, back in the day it was 40 players fighting this evil dragon. Well, in a realistically does that make any sense? Realistic fantasy, wouldn't it probably take like a village? Wouldn't it take like hundreds of people? Well, I think that's where cloud gaming would really work, where you have hundreds of people having to work together to kill off a mighty dragon, and then being all those hundreds of players present with no lag or anything, because everything's running on this supercomputer and it's being streamed to everybody. So you could be doing this on a phone, raiding and playing with other players. You can be on your PC, you can be on your TV. So I think that is where the two places where I would go. Then you start thinking about other types of games. You think about adventure games and things we've never seen. You're a soldier fighting off, thousands of players in some mighty battle of some kind. There's so many things. Really, I think the key with a cloud-only game is you're limited by your imagination mostly. I don't know exactly how powerful these supercomputers are, from like, what Xbox has to what Google has, and if there's so many true limitations. And we haven't even hinted on or talked about the AI and the sophistication that you can get with that, with you interacting with maybe an NPC who has his own thoughts and minds. And that's also part of cloud gaming. So when I talk about this is where the future of cloud gaming is in cloud only games. And that's why one of the things that bummed me out when Stadia decided to just nix that, I think Stadia realized it wasn't going to be adopted anytime soon. So they're taking a more slower approach. And I think Xbox already starting to make, PlayStation potentially making stuff like that, making cloud-only games, is really going to potentially make a mark. I do hope more get into this. I think Amazon will definitely get into this, and I think Google will get back on the horse at some point and get on it. But cloud-only games are really where the juice and the magic are going to lie when it comes to cloud gaming. I think even with my channel, I'm a little early to the dance right now. I'm sitting there at the school dance right now, all alone, looking around, seeing if there's any pretty ladies to dance with, and I'm just sitting there with my hands in my pocket because there's no one here yet. I showed up too early to the party, and that's kind of where my YouTube channel is right now. So you'll see this expand, grow, and a cloud-only game will be the magic that really brings, I think, a lot of gamers together, and they start to go, you know what, this cloud gaming thing is pretty amazing. And I think that's what it's going to take, unfortunately. But yeah. All right, Juice, I don't know how to say, or Jude, his name's Juice Cider, says, I would like to know what your favorite cloud gaming service is. This one's very easy for me. It's definitely Stadia. If you guys don't happen to know that by now, the reason I love Stadia so much is that I kind of feel like it brings all the best worlds of cloud gaming together. It has the best business model. You can buy a game and own it and it be in your library, and no worries, no frills with that. You can subscribe to Stadia Pro and have access to tons of games. I think I have about 100 Stadia Pro games because I've been collecting the games since the very beginning. And I think it just kind of brings the best of all of it together, mixed in with is still an industry leader in performance. It's maybe now having lots of competition with GeForce Now. I would rank GeForce Now 3080 tier. The 3080 tier, keep that in mind. The very highest tier, I think rank it above Stadia in regards to performance, but it's not as far as some people would like you to believe it is. It's really not. Stadia, when a developer decides to put in the time to make out a great port, honestly, it's right up there, and the games will look gorgeous, but it depends. If the developer has the time to put in the work to make a game look good. For me, it's Stadia, because like I said, it brings everything together. You have GeForce Now, which I love. I have a big Steam library, but the UI with GeForce Now can sometimes be a little clunky, and that hasn't been fixed to the degree that I would like it. Then you have Amazon Luna, who, they put out great games. They have an interesting business model. I think their business model might be more of the future of what you'll see more cloud services be, where it's just very much like a Netflix. You subscribe, you get access to a bunch of games, you have different channels. So really, I think even though Stadia is my favorite, I have nothing against any other service. You will definitely, or I will definitely be using them like I do right now with movies and TV shows. I recently canceled a bunch of my services. I had Hulu, I had HBO, I have Netflix, I have Discovery Plus. I unsubscribed to all of them because I don't need to watch a bunch of movies and shows on those, and I'm just throwing away my money if I'm not using them. Then I'm just subscribed to one thing. I think that it goes back to the question from earlier. It's just going to be like that. But Stadia has that thing where you are owning your games and you're having them in one place, and I think that's really key. Xbox Cloud Gaming has tons of games accessed to the service, but you don't actually own them, and they'll leave the service. And when that happens, you're kind of DOA. You can't do anything when Xbox decides to get rid of a game. I think they'll change that, but they haven't changed it yet. So until some of these other services adopt kind of like what Stadia does, Stadia is my favorite, it hands down. And so we'll see if that changes in the future, and I think it will. I think Xbox will definitely look at what Stadia is doing. I don't think Amazon Luna will, but very fascinating. That's why Stadia is my favorite, though. I think it just has everything, and it does everything well. So yeah. All right, guys. So this podcast has now been almost close to 30 minutes. I think we're about 25 minutes. I want to say thank you, guys. Do me a big favor, though. Ask me a question, whether it's tweeting me at SunnyCloudGames on Twitter, in a comment section below. Wherever you guys can ask me questions, I will answer them in this podcast. This is how we're going to do our podcast going forward. Again, the Patreon members and YouTube members get early access. Really special thanks to all of them, because they are really what's keeping the channel going. YouTube has been very inconsistent with monetization and the way they do ads, and lately it just hasn't been very good. So some of my bones are definitely made through YouTube memberships and Patreon. So thank you to you guys. And again, ask the questions, guys. And if you are a Patreon or YouTube member and you ask a question, your question does get priority. So thank you guys again for listening, and I'll catch you in the next podcast. I'm Sunny, and as always, I'll see you in the clouds.